Okay, the gang's all here. Now today, guys, we're going to do our video a little bit different than we've done before because the information that you are researching, Mike, and dropping right now, I know you're always immersed in this, so you're like whatever, but it's a big deal. We are friggin' naming the enemies of humanity by name, and it would be very easy for people in other countries to easily identify where these people live. This is dangerous. So I don't want to just post it on YouTube and walk away. So what I'm doing here is giving you a little introduction so that cats can come along and take this video. It's going to be posted on the cat report, snip off my instructions, and then post the video. Do your own opening or do whatever and own it as your original video. We need to get the word out to everybody on multiple platforms all at once. Okay? That's what we're going to do. So now I'm going to pause.
Sounds like a plan.
It sounds like a plan. And then I'm going to let y'all introduce, and I'll be in the background watching. Meow.
Okay, Douglas. I told you you have to frame this properly. So I'm watching and I'm taking notes.
Okay. Welcome to the Michael and Douglas Show. I'm Douglas. Hi, Michael.
I'm Michael. Nice to see you, Douglas.
I'm using our formal names this time because we are now into a new formal attack, a bunker buster bomb that has been dropped upon the greatest cabal of economic terrorists of history, worse than the Babylonian Radanites, worse than the Venetian bankers, worse than the Rothschilds, worse than the Illuminati and the Fabians. No, we have the list now, the full list of 1,700 people, 700 of whom are traitors to America and have committed treason, and 1,000 of them fly underneath the idea that they're just having a nice social dinner club meeting. They are called the Pilgrims Society. And now Michael and the Miners have revealed for the first time comprehensive lists of who these people are, their interlocking directorships, and if you go back and look at the proofs that have been created by Mike and the Miners over the last few years, and also the work of Tyla and her team on Gab, you will find the very people, the list of every single person that you can imagine that you really never knew were British agents who are here to make America nothing more than another Commonwealth nation or a proxy for British imperialistic white supremacist control of the world. Hegemony is their only agenda. So, Mike, how was it that you came across some new information? Because when the Miners come across something new, that's real news.
Yeah, that's like red meat to a dog. That's what's been happening. Just in the last week, well, I'll say the latest thing that happened 2 days ago, a list dropped in our lap from Scotland. And it was a complete Pilgrims membership list from 2004, January 28th, 2004. And it listed everybody. Now, the reason that's so surprising to us is because they have maintained so much secrecy that knowing the current Pilgrims has never been easy to find, if at all. And now we know why, because in this particular document, it tells them that they're not allowed to even tell people they're Pilgrims unless they get executive committee approval. And if you look at this list, it's got the executive committee on there. I just had to print this off and read a few of the executive committee from 2014, which included the British ambassador to the United States. It included Lord Kingsdown, who was the governor of the Bank of England, Sir David Connor, who was the Dean of Windsor Castle, the Robin Rennick, Baron Rennick, was the Lord Chamberlain. And then more interestingly, we've got this Baron Camoys, who was on the executive committee. Let me read a little bit of his resume. He was general manager and director of National Provincial and Rothschilds London Limited in 1968, and managing director of Rothschilds Intercontinental Bank Limited in 1969 after the purchase of the Rothschild Intercontinental Bank by American Express. He was named CEO and managing director of Amex Bank Limited, and then he became its chairman, after which he became managing director of Barclays Merchant Bank, and then its executive vice chairman. These are the guys making decisions on when you're allowed to talk about the Pilgrims. Now, that's just a small list. So that's why we haven't heard about them, because these guys are working under the radar screen to take down America using the money from the Bank of England. That has been our strong conclusion. And now this is like putting a ribbon on a bow and ribbon on the box that we have been identifying for the last 10 years.
This is no dinner party. This is insider cabal, insider trading cabal that literally are the economic lords, the puppet masters of the world.
Right.
And let me frame this just for a second. People probably know a little bit about Cecil Rhodes. Can you imagine Cecil Rhodes built upon the integrated British East India Company that got integrated into Parliament at some point? Mm-hmm. And then he used the South Africa trading company's land to go to South Africa and basically steal all the gold and the diamonds. Imagine that. Right. So this is a type of imperialism based upon the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company's what was called merchants with a sword. They fleeced every single country that they have ever come in contact with and either turned it into a domain or a Commonwealth nation of the United Kingdom, and or just simply fleeced them completely. Now, let me just show you a timeline of some of these criminals. After Cecil Rhodes basically got control of the gold, which controls all currency, of course, and he got control of the diamonds, which is, one of the biggest brainwashing schemes in history. Diamonds are.
May I interject on the gold issue, since we're there, is we have now traced the source of Solomon's gold to the same mines that the Rothschilds took over with De Beers.
And the British haven't, you might think this is the past. Recently, they discovered in 2 African countries supposedly enough gold in the ground to be equal to all of the gold in the world. No, they didn't. Those were dead mines. China invented one of those myths, and Britain invented the other myth. They're still going after oil, of course. As you look at the Middle East, really, that is the Mediterranean basin oil that is being fought over, the oil on Golan Heights, the oil in Jordan, the oil that the other countries, Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, should have rights to, but the labor Zionists in Israel make certain that the British get their piece of the pie before anyone gets any other piece of the pie. They get the lion's share.
And why is that? Because back in the mid-1800s, the Rothschilds and their chief broker, Lord Montefiore, cut a deal with the settlers in Israel that if they funded them, they would give them economic rights, preferences all throughout the Middle East. And that's what's happened.
These economic deals are going on to this very day, especially here in America, where the Anglo-American alliance is as clear of a economic terrorist cabal as the mines of Rhodesia or the Cecil Rhodes inner group, which he had at that point. 3 or 4 of the richest people in the world got together and decided that they were just going to be white supremacists, imperialists, and control the world. And so they set out a plan that was revealed by Lillian Scott Troy, which you and the miners have revealed so many times. And they have absolutely went right down the list and made sure that all of those points were in fact being controlled by a dinner group. Now, I make a joke about the dinner group because that's what they try to fly their nonsense under, that they're just getting together to have dinner. No, they rule by basically what is called Chatham rules, Chatham House rules. But first, let me go back. Cecil Rhodes, when he died, handed over a lot of his control to Alfred Milner, who created what was called the Milner Kindergarten. And then that created later Chatham House, where the Royal Institute for International Affairs basically controlled the entire British government's relationship with every other world government or nation or any place that had any resources that they needed to steal from. And if you don't understand this, you need to look at Rio Tinto, you need to look at Lockheed Martin, you need to look at the fact that the golden share is Serco, the SES is basically nothing more than British aristocracy overlaid upon our federal government. So Cecil Rhodes and his group, they created the Cecil Rhodes Scholarships, which was to train young people in this brainwashing of British imperialism that continues to our day.
Specifically American young people.
Absolutely. The Anglo-American Alliance, they call it, or the special relationship. Yes, they have a special relationship. We are the lapdog of the monarchy of Britain, period. That's all we are. We were never free. We never had our sovereignty. And because the U.S. Federal Reserve is owned by British bankers, and, you know, people are going to, they always say, oh, it's a Rothschild conspiracy. It's the Illuminati. It's the Committee of 300. It's the Prince's Club of the Isles, on and on. No, it's not.
No, it's the Jews. And the gays.
The Jews, yes. The Jews and the gays.
Referring back to your Jim Fetzer interview, that's what a lot of people will say.
What that is, people who are angry, and they do a little research, and they scratch the surface, and then they hang on to the fact that they found that there was a group, a Bavarian Masonic group called the Illuminati. And now they blame everything on the Illuminati, which is completely nonsense. The Illuminati was... I know the history of it well, and I know their practices, and I know their Masonic rites, which were actually never finished by Adam Weishaupt. But the point is that they were created by who? The Rothschilds. So that the
Nathan Mayer Rothschild.
Now we want to be clear. I don't consider Rothschild to be a Jew. I consider Rothschilds to be Babylonian Radhanites and British Radhanites, and they are the economic advisor to the monarchy. And once they got control of that, they got control of the most powerful force on the earth. And so one can see how people get confused by getting partial information. But let's go back. Cecil Rhodes Group, Alfred Milner's Kindergarten, the Round Table, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, thank you, which then came over to America and started the Council on Foreign Relations, which has controlled all of our foreign dealings through all the presidents back at least, well, for a long, long time, let's just say. And then you have to look at what the British did. The British then created what was called the Empire Union. Empire Press Union, which basically is their political propaganda control, or basically government through journalism. And then they created all kinds of isms. Now, these isms, from welfarism with Jeremy Bentham and Ruskin to the Webbs and the Fabianism to socialism, fascism, Bolshevism, communism, Chinese communism, all of those were incubated in London, through the money of the City of London, to destabilize other countries so the British could sweep in like they did with the British East India Company with a sword and take every valuable asset and then control that government. Matter of fact, the worst politically, well, it's a police state. What are the worst police states in the world? That would be New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and Britain. And basically then subsequently, that is also America and all of the Dominion countries or Commonwealth countries, part of the United Kingdom. And then they created the League of Nations. After fomenting the war, they create, supposedly out of philanthropic ideas, the League of Nations, which we never joined, America never joined, because why? It was a British-controlled piece of economic fascism. And then they created the Institute for Pacific Relations, and then they created the United Nations after Bretton Woods, which was a British attempt to create a one world currency. When that didn't work out, then they created the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and all of the agencies of the United Nations, who I say have never done anything good ever and have always been British controlled. So what we see now is that the Pilgrim Society for the over 100 years have been using all of these different groups, including literally the YMCA, all the social groups that were
And Salvation Army.
Salvation
They
Army.
needed a way to replace their black slaves, which they lost control of in 1833. So they started enslaving Irishmen, Portuguese, Chinese, brown people from South America. They didn't care.
All we have to do is ask Devadashi Kamalalamba Harris.
Who?
That she's actually a Brahmin prostitute. She is a Deva Dashi. That is her name. And
well,
Kamala.
Devi, that was her prior. Her first middle name was Devi, by the way.
Correct.
It changed on her.
No, it was Iyer.
Birth certificate.
Iyer, and it changed to Deva.
Oh, okay.
Her parents were Indian. They were Hindu, and they dedicated their child in an old ritual that has now been outlawed, but they still continue it when they donate their child to the temple to be a prostitute for the Brahmins. That's who she is. She's a prostitute for who? Not for America. She's not an American. And who is her British handler? Dug him off. So we have always a British handler of anyone who's in the White House. We have, as is well known and has recently been touted everywhere, that every single politician in Washington has assigned an agent who is a labor Zionist, or I think in America they call it the AIPAC group. And so there is literally a British controller. And when you say labor Zionist and you mention Israel, that's British. When you talk about Russian communism, that's British. Chinese communism, that's British. When you talk about all the most evil governments in the world, they were all incubated right in London. And that's the reason that, they had their writers like George Orwell and the Huxleys write predictive programming to tell us what is about to happen with 1984. Well, folks, it's past 1984 and it's much worse. And it is exactly the plan that the Pilgrims have created. So do not think for 1 second that when we say Pilgrim Society and you don't know who we're talking about, if you don't do your homework, you have no idea how powerful this group is. And until they change their name, they are completely hidden. So until recently, they were hidden.
And they were hidden. And these lists are bombshell. We're seeing now the current players in this 2004 membership list that we just received and have now partially analyzed. It shows 1,700 people that I believe were the powers behind 9/11. And the interesting thing is this meeting that they've documented was only 5 days before Facebook went live. And then we also see in this list that the two leaders of British Serco, the brothers Nicholas and Nicholas Soames and his brother, forgot his first name, are both members of the Pilgrim Society. We figured they were, but we never had any proof. Now we have proof that, and Serco now processes all patents at the U.S. Patent Office. I get that alone should cause every lawmaker that doesn't raise, what do you say? How do you describe how scandalous this is?
Well, it's that they're stealing the human thinking and imagination.
Right.
It came from you because they can't do it. So that's what they're taking from you.
Yeah, they are stealing the lifeblood creativity out of not only the American people, but people all around the world. We now know that FDR in 1942 stole over 50,000 Axis patents, patents by inventors in Axis countries, and he used the war as an excuse to do it. And he turned around and set up an office in Washington to give away those patents to American corporations. And why American corporations? Because these were all the corporations that the Pilgrims had set up and funded with City of London money, with Zurich money, with Geneva money to become the post-war economy. And so now we see this agenda. Now we look at the bylaws. They even published the bylaws in this 2004 document, and they have very specific rules for how people can become members, be invited to be members, when they will be turned away as a member. And we now see the inner workings. And what we think is this document was in some estate of someone, a pilgrim who died, and this was probably in the library, and the kids didn't know what it was, so they put it out on eBay. That's how we've gotten it. Up until now, I've never seen a list like this. They've been pretty good at keeping these away from the public. But now that we see this treachery, we have the list, and one page. Henry Kissinger's on this document. Caspar Weinberger, Alexander Haig, Margaret Thatcher, who's the mophead MP? Boris Johnson. He's on this list. I mean, it's everyone that we would suspect has now been proven, without a doubt.
There have been nations that have now charged the World Economic Forum with basically being an economic terrorist group, and that they have basically committed crimes. Well, that is nothing more than another front. That's another ism. That's the WEF-ism, I'd call it, the World Economic Forum ism, which is nothing more than a man who is the son of a award-winning Nazi industrialist, Klaus Schwab. And what is that? That is when the billionaires get together, but they don't actually really support each other. They're all trying to steal the same pot of money. So it goes back to ancient Babylon, as far back as you can imagine, when the banking rules of the Hammurabi Code were actually turned into a way to empower bankers to be the rulers of the world. And then we saw this as it moved along with people that they call Ashkenazi Jews, which is a joke since there are none. And you know, that there's Sephardic Jews. No, there's not. That's a made up thing by some guy in Italy.
Neither one of those is a reference in the Torah.
Yes, exactly. And so what we have here is nothing more than these are the front groups that we do recognize, that we do get angry with, whether it be the Illuminati or the Fabians or the World Economic Forum or whoever you wish to point your finger at, but they're not going to point the finger at the people using Chatham House rules in the Pilgrims Society. Chatham House rules say you can come, you can't write anything down, you can listen, but you cannot attribute it to the person who said it. Well, who's at those meetings? That would be the monarchy. That would be the top aristocrats in Britain and all of the major directors of the largest corporations in the world. That's who we're talking about.
Here's the 2004 list, and here are the names of the people, and this is their document, and it's got both the American and the British Pilgrims. And I wanted to point out that last week we were able to obtain from their website their most recent newsletters, and look who was featured on page 3 of the latest Pilgrims newsletter, one of the latest ones. Maybe one more.
The lady who led the impeachment charges for Trump's Ukrainian phone call that revealed the corruption with Ukraine.
And she's British.
And she's British, and she's a man because she has a knighthood. She's not a woman. And what was it? Colonel Vindman was another one. All the people who were part of that supposed indictment of Trump for impeachment because of a conversation with Ukraine, including who was the Secretary of State at that time?
But at the time we were reporting that, we were pointing out that they were senior executive service, which of course now we see is a tentacle of the British.
Exactly. Senior executive service is a construct so that the British could set up an oversight structure on the entire executive branch of the United States. And it was pushed into being in 1978 by Jimmy Carter, and
Mark
the
Malloch Brown.
Lord Mark Malloch Brown, and a number of senators and congressmen. But they were all taking orders from this secret group. And here we now know from these documents that Lord Carrington, the Foreign Secretary in England, and Alexander Haig, the Secretary of State in the United States, and also I think Haig was CIA director, wasn't he?
Yep.
But anyway, they were collaborating during the Nixon administration. And what happened with Kissinger, with Paul Volcker, who was also in Nixon's cabinet? What did they do? They canceled the gold standard and put us on the petrodollar. And Kissinger's first speech to a public body after he was appointed Secretary of State was not in the United States. He flew over to England and presented his credentials to the Pilgrims Society, who he was an officer for in the United States. And that comes out very strongly in this 2004 document. He was a vice president in 2004 of the Pilgrim Society, as was Paul Volcker, as was, and I didn't know this, was Caspar Weinberger in 2004. We're talking about the people that fomented 9/11.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, remember that some people have given proofs that it was a British Royal Air Force officer who led the attack along with Dick Cheney from his bunker in, the vice president's home, the Naval Observatory there in Washington, D.C. And so you cannot find anything that doesn't go back to the Brits. Now, here's how they do it.
Right.
They had, in the ancient days, when the Roman Catholic Church did not participate in usury, they created the Knights of Malta after they had allowed the Templars to be overthrown, and the consistories or banks of the Templars that were used to store money of the Crusaders going to the east, to Israel, to Jerusalem, to free Jerusalem. They used the Knights of Malta, who were really first were Templars and then Hospitallers, and then they became the Knights of Malta, which was again.
That's a good point, Douglas. So there's a difference between the Hospitallers and the Knights Templar, and I think a number of people get those two confused, because the Knights Templar actually were against usury, and that some people were thinking they were, but the Hospitallers were never against usury. They were the Pope's shock troops. The Knights Templar were attempting to set up a non-usurious bank.
And then the Vatican Bank then started participating in interest collection and usury. And then they created the Knights of Malta. And the Knights of Malta were basically the white and black nobility, in other words, the deposed nobility and the still seated nobility of Europe. And it was an insider trader group. But what happened after Henry VIII, who then presumed that he would become the Pope of his own religion and literally separated from the Roman Catholic Church? And then later the British said, well, we'll create our own British Knights of Malta. But notice, they didn't change the name. They just made it British. Well, that's what they've done throughout history. They have absorbed and co-opted every evil organization. Now, this started in Babylon.
Can I interrupt you on that? Knights of Malta, that always confused me. Well, who's the Knights of Malta? Is it the one in the Vatican or the one in the United States or in England? And what they did is they finessed it. They didn't touch the Knights of Malta headquartered at the Vatican. What they did is they set up an English priory of the Knights of Malta, and essentially, well, no, not essentially, they made the prince, the British prince, the head of the Knights of Malta, and that would be Prince Charles.
And he's also, of course, the head of the Prince's Trust. He's the head of the Prince's Club of the Isles. He's also one of the richest people on the face of the earth.
Okay, since we're talking, I wanted to show you. Here is the document that absolutely nails the organization of the American side of the British Pilgrim Society. And there you go, Kissinger, Sisk, Volcker, Weinberger, Whitehead. And if you go into their detail, and Henry Luce, the third That is Time Magazine, Life Magazine, Sports Illustrated, and Fortune Magazine. So we have been covered every which way to Sunday by this dinner group.
They must have really good dinners. And
Oh,
they
man.
it says right there in the documents that you've now uncovered that their rules are they use Chatham House rules. In other
Right.
words, this is insider trading, just like the Knights of Malta on Malta through the Vatican and the Knights of Malta in Britain. It's just like the World Economic Forum didn't let anybody take any notes to begin with. And what do they always tell? What will the trends, the economic trends be? They created economic trends. They are like these hedge
Right.
funds.
They use the media to tell lies and get the public to believe the lies. They talked about that at the Empire Press Union that you mentioned. They said their job was to create public opinion. And they did a good job of it. They were not against the Germans before World War I, but they put out some very scandalous cartoons that were total lies and got the British public to change its opinion about Germany.
And by the way, these are not Britons, they're not Celts. They are in no way what they say they are. They're the opposite. Take, for instance, Winston Churchill. He was a reporter, a journalist in South Africa, and he basically made up the lies that created the Second Boer War.
Right.
And he was supposedly held as a prisoner of war and escaped. All lies. And so what did he do in World War I? And when he was leading Britain, he allowed the propaganda, which was basically, remember, Reuters was created by the Rothschilds as their banking newsletter. And now,
Right.
of course,
mid-1800s.
And so Thomson Reuters and the AP are all British. And everything that is read on American news comes from Avid. And Avid's other name is ISIS. And ISIS is another name for the Thames River, which is the river that runs next to.
I have to point out, their original name for Avid was Leader Plus. And that was using our technology out of our invention to manage all those chyrons all over the world.
And, just by coincidence, Avid also has a thing called, I think it's called Avid Election or something like that, where they tell you the results of the election the night of the elections, though we haven't counted the votes yet.
Right.
And so we also know that, of course, Dominion, but through Smartmatic LLC, Mark Malek Brown, created Optech in Venezuela with Jimmy Carter in 1978 or 9, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we are still controlled by the British. They determine who they select. We have no elections here. There's no such thing. It's all electronic and it's all accessible online. And we found out recently when Trump tried to stand up against that they will do anything to stop people from finding out that they basically, just like the Fabians, just like the welfarists, just like the Labour Party in Britain, that was to placate the masses. That was
Right.
the opium of the masses. And so, folks, you are being lied to left and right. But if you look closely, you will find that the people on this list, the 700 Americans on this list, are the biggest traitors who have committed treason in America, who do not take a vow to the Constitution. They take a vow to the sovereignty of the British monarchy. And if you're a lawyer and you're an esquire, unfortunately, you took a vow to Britain when you became a lawyer, and you broke the constitutional rules, which say that you cannot have an aristocratic title or office, especially endowed by a monarchy of a foreign country. We have been overtaken. And the fact of the matter is this drop that the cats, the Citizens Addicted to Truth, that Tyler leads on her Gab site and other places, these folks from around the world have been contributing to the miners to again and again reveal deeper levels of this treasonous overthrow of America. But remember, America never existed. The Treaty of Paris was never fully finished because it said that until every British citizen was given reparations for the lands that they owned before the American Revolution, that the treaty was not fully instated. And there are still numerous lands in America that belong to the British Crown. For instance, people don't know that over half of Old Jerusalem belongs to the monarchy of Britain. Now, did they really own it? No, they stole it. They stole, just like they've stolen the rights to so many places and claimed that they are part of their dominion or part of their Commonwealth nation. No, these are all lies. If you think for 1 second that Israel is independent, you are sorely mistaken. They are British labor Zionists. Now let's remember that they created Hitler. Okay? Why did they create Hitler? Because they created fascism. They created the fascism of Franco, the fascism of Hitler, the fascism which we call communism. All of these social opiates, these social placation of the masses are actually owned by these people we're talking about.
Right. They don't really care what the people call their beliefs and practices that they make decisions based on. They'll keep spinning that, however they've got to spin it for the next generation. And that's why socialism has been so successful.
Well, that's because they really can't come out and say what it really is, which is Satanism. And this is a spiritual war.
Yes.
In Babylon, that's what they did. They took demons and turned them into gods. They took gods and turned them into demons. And so we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that these people have one thing on their mind: money. The second thing on their mind is to continue their corporate dynasty. And so they inbred with each other. All of these Babylonian Radhanite bankers from England and Germany and from Holland and Sweden all interbred until at this point you can see that their interbreeding led them to be idiots. These are people who literally can sit on 100 major corporations as voting members. How do they have time to go to even the meetings, let alone to control these companies? Because they send out their Pilgrims Society newsletter that tells of the trends that you need to be part of if you wish to make money. That's what this is all about, insider trading. There are no more nations. There are basically nations with dictators and nations who think they don't have dictators, who are actually have the dictator of the British monarchy in control. And this is the sad news. So if you think for 1 minute that you can stand up against these people by voting, then you might as well just take another opium pill, because voting has been basically outlawed. There's no free markets in America. There's no voting in America. There's no free elections. And there's no such thing as a politician who's in their second term that doesn't know what we're talking about, because they all have handlers, British handlers, Israeli handlers, Mossad handlers. We know that now the Mossad is hearing every single telephone conversation, even in a skiff in Washington, D.C., because they have the, what are they called? These devices that are able to spy. Stingray. They used to have them planted in the House and Senate and the White House. So the Mossad knew before anybody else what was going on.
And that was really, the Mossad was just a veneer for MI6. So we create these personalities around these different groups, thinking they're some sort of independent entity from the others. But what we have to realize is this has been a very concerted effort of the Pilgrims through the British intelligence agencies to control the world. And what's the role of America? We were chosen as their financier of their world police force. So that's why the British always tag along whenever we go anywhere, because they're in fact in charge, but they don't have enough people to really staff all these armies. So that's America's role, is to be the world policeman for the Pilgrims Society, and always has been, as has the CIA.
That's absolutely true. The Five Eyes has basically fomented more wars than any other organization in history.
Right.
And pardon me?
It's scandalous.
It is absolutely scandalous, and they have no morals, and they worship demons that used to be gods. Beelzebub. Well, El was the name of the Elohim. It was the name of a god. Now, when you hear people talk about this, you'll hear them say that these are demons, these are giants, these are Anunnaki who are worshiping gold. No, these are Babylonian Radhanites who came from Solomon's gold, and has been passed down through the basically collapsing Silk Road that then supposedly the myth of the Ashkenazi then supposedly went into Europe. And
that was the 11th century. It just appeared in the 11th century.
It's like Sephardism, Sephardic Jews.
11th, 12th, 13th, 14th century.
Two people created Sephardic Jews, a man and his wife in Italy. So when you start talking about the different Hasidic Jews, Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, remember that there's not a single one of them can fulfill the Messiah prophecy. Why? Because you have to be 100% Hebrew blood. Well, there are no haplogroups for Hebrews. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as a blood marker for being a Jew, let alone an Ashkenazi Jew, which is just a joke that people try to float this all the time, or that the Ashkenazi mafia, that's who rules America. Well,
You mean the Khazarian mafia?
I mean, Khazarian, who are Ashkenazi. Khazarian mafia is what people will tell you. And then you say, well, what is that? And they'll say, I don't know. But all I know is that the high-speed train that goes from Washington to New York City is where all Khazarian mafia business transpires. It's like, these are myths beyond imagination. They used to say that it was the Vatican, the City of London, and Washington, D.C.
Well, there's
No, it's
probably a
not.
little bit of truth in that, but it's certainly
A little.
not in context.
A little. I mean, there are people who literally convert to Judaism so that they can co-opt this economic cabal, so that they can be literally economic terrorists who use what the British have used for a long time, which is Sabbatean, Frankist type of immorality, which includes worship of Moloch, which means child sacrifice. We know that. I mean, just look at the great aristocrats in England. You can't name one. You can't name a monarch who wasn't completely degraded by their pedophilia, by their whoring, by their power and control, by their desire for hegemony. So when Cecil Rhodes came along, and he basically became the richest man in the world at that time, he said, we are the white rulers of the world. We are the imperialists. We are the white supremacists. We need to tell the rest of the world what to do because they're not smart enough. The funny thing about that is they're so inbred that really you can't name a really intelligent British person in history because they've been so inbred. And when you look at their isms that have come out of England, they all will claim that they have nothing to do with England. England and the City of London had nothing to do with Lenin and Trotsky and Marx and Engels. No, they all were bred there in an incubator.
The historians and the researchers and the archivists of that period were paid off to hide this data. And they've done a very good job. I mean, look at how few people know anything about the Pilgrims Society, even though if you look at the newspapers back in 1902, there were whole full-page spreads about their first meeting. And that Imperial Press Conference in 1909 on June 5th, a double-page spread about it. And yet the historian, the go-to historian of the period, Carol Quigley from Georgetown, he doesn't even mention them.
And we know that he had to have been paid not to mention them because you couldn't do that research and not come up with the Pilgrim Society being at the heart of the Anglo-American alliance. But
Right.
then they paid Will and Ariel Durant to write history so that the British looked as if their hands were clean.
Right.
They have many of the modern writers who have come out of England were what? They were paid political propagandists. And they literally
if you look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, where did they do their writing? In the home of some lord, you know. And look at Balfour, look at Sheldon, look at all these different lords who paid people to write what they wanted as pre-programming of people, so that they get used to the fact that this was the way that it was going to be in the future.
Right. I was thinking, as you said that, the British War Propaganda Board in World War I had a list of who's who of British writers who were all propagandists for the British pitch that the Germans were these bad apples that needed to be taken down. And they even did, it wasn't a full page spread, but it was a large spread in the New York Times where they pronounced their support for the war and actually signed it. We have copies of that. And so we're talking about G.K. Chesterton. We're talking about who wrote the Sherlock Holmes series.
Lewis Stevenson? No, what's his name?
No,
No,
I'll think of it in a second.
Well, while y'all are pondering that, did you remember?
No.
Because the thing is that I had a firsthand experience of this. As a young woman, I was a Rotary scholar. So I was invited to go to a Rotary club for a year for postgraduate work, right? Now,
You were being recruited.
Probably, but I didn't know it was so naive. So here's and believe me, I was like quite something when I was a young woman. So anyway, that's a very interesting point. So I went over to this Rotary Club. Okay. I didn't like Manchester. I couldn't stand what I was studying. But the one thing I remembered all throughout time is the man who took me in a car ride, who was a Rotarian, someone I highly respected. And he told me that I was not aware of the special relationship that the United Kingdom and the U.S. had, and that the way I think America is not the way it is. And that he couldn't tell me anything more about it, but that I needed to research this and find that truth. And here I am, 40 plus years later. And so may I segue into the cat pounce?
I did think of the author, Arthur Conan Doyle.
of course.
And I
Yes,
interrupted you too.
cat pounce.
Cat pounce. Because
Cat pounce.
here's the thing is we all hear this. This is all overwhelming. What the heck are you going to do?
Right.
Well, bubble it down. What Mike has shown you is a list of people. They're like real people who live in your neighborhood, your communities. You can identify who they are. This is an enemies list. But we need to let the Pilgrims know that we know who they are. So maybe fear and anxiety will get them to stand down,
Yeah.
because there are a lot more of us than them.
They have stayed quiet for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this list they intended to have public. Some kids from one of their members probably did it inadvertently, and if they'd have known about it, they would have taken it down. So it's out there now.
Yes, it is. So what we have to do as citizens, and I'm not asking a lot, is to notify the Pilgrims that we know who they are. So I'm asking you, and I'll put a little banner right here underneath, go to this link, and we've left some instructions of how you can help and how you can put an information right there in the heart of the beast. Thank you.
Your other plan, Deputy Dog, is so brilliant because in America, the federal government has no rights whatsoever in a county or a state unless they're given permission by the sheriff of that county and or the governor of that state. And even then, if it goes into a county, then the sheriff can arrest any federal agent they want, including U.S. Marshals. And so what we have seen, look at what's happening now. Pavel Durov of Telegram, French citizen, he's actually Russian. And he was arrested in France because his site Telegram is being accused of corrupt activity. Well, hello, that's Deputy Dog. We need to arrest these people for their crimes against humanity, for their treason, for their traitorous behavior when they come into any county in America. So as these politicians are doing their thing with their constituency, we need to arrest them and say, you voted for the, let's call it the All Hazards and Pandemic Act, which gives our sovereignty away to the World Health Organization. We need to put them in jail and carry out.
But who is the we that's going to do that? Because everybody said we need to put them in jail. Exactly who? Well, the power is in the county level, in that local level, and you have powers. I put a banner down here on Operation Deputy Dog because we have to take the top out And that would be the Pilgrim Society. And as it begins to fall, our governments are going to fall. Everything will just fall apart because we're going to break their chain of command. And so where do we land? We land right here at the county level. And Operation Deputy Dog tells you how you can make your county better and get back on the trail of the Constitution.
There you go.
We have a contract, people. They broke it. We got to get back with that contract.
On the latest published AFI site, we have a list of 12 items that are needed to unwind this Pilgrim's agenda. Lillian Scott Troy in 1908 found their 24-step strategy to annex America. What this 12-step is the counter argument to that. And if we can implement those 12 things, we will disempower the Pilgrim Society. No question.
It's very simple. The United Nations needs to be closed in America and considered a terrorist organization.
Yeah, there are UN people on these membership lists.
The British-controlled U.S. Federal Reserve, we need to default on that debt, whatever it is, 35 trillion now or whatever. We need to kick all British out of all American business and make America first, not Britain first. We need to take the 700 pilgrims that are on that list that you have and consider them to be traitors because they are not ambassadors. So why are they going to an ambassador dinner party? That makes only one speck of good sense, and that's that they are traitors, and they have been bribed, and they have been offered the knighthoods from the monarchy. They've been offered the Order of the British Empire. They have been basically become Rhodes Scholars.
I knew there were a lot of titles, but and now looking at all these titles, these people are just all gummed up with these titles. They can't move.
Oh yes,
they've got them so tied down. Anytime they probably doubt somebody's loyalty, they just give them a title. They give them another title and another one. And sooner or later, the people are just shamed and they're not doing anything.
Rhodes Scholars. Let's name one that everybody knows. Bill Clinton. He and his wife sold out America to China. Period. Yes. They are more Chinese communist than President Xi. Okay. They are on the Walton board. They get money for everything China makes for us, which is made out of radioactive material, has lead in it, has every substandard you ever imagined. That's what China does for us. And that's made, of course, the Clintons rich. They have 5 different indictments against them for the corruption of their foundations. And basically, then you see any Rhodes Scholar, definitely criminal activity. Any of the World Economic Forum young up-and-comers, which they have a list of them, they're criminals. They are basically being bribed to let the sovereignty of America be controlled by globalist, transnationalists who, in fact, have no Americans good at heart. So this is an old story. It's been going on for thousands of years. It's nothing new. It's the worship of Mammon. It's the worship of banks. It's making banks and corporations not responsible. But now what we're seeing is that the fake cardboard cutouts, Silicon Valley cardboard cutouts, who really are just agents of DARPA and In-Q-Tel and the Highlands Forum, which we've described to you many times.
And those are agents of the Pilgrims. Oh, here it is.
Totally. Agents of the Pilgrims. All that money is stolen. For instance, they want to say that Telegram is where the secret messages are going down for child pornography and corruption. What about the dark web and Tor?
I want to show you this first, and then I want to talk about that for a second. Okay, so here is the list, the American list of what they call honorary members. Take a look at item number, the next to last item.
Mm-hmm.
The permanent representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations. That's on our U.S. Pilgrims list.
Well,
we invited the UN in to run our country through the Pilgrims.
When the British came up with the League of Nations, people said, if you're going to invite our enemies into it, what people were at war with, how is it that you expect it to be a peace organization? It was never intended to be a peace organization. It was intended to be global hegemony. They wanted, under the auspices of philanthropy and peace and goodness and education, all these wonderful things, to literally give total control of the world to the Brits. And remember, crazy King Charles, who said that he had trillions of dollars to spend on climate change and never once refers to the sun, which creates all climate on the earth. And by the way, says global warming is happening. Now, that's wrong.
I don't think he believes in the sun.
No, he doesn't believe in this. He thinks he's the sun. It's not global warming. It's global cooling. We now have the entire Atlantic ocean currents, the major Atlantic ocean current, collapsing and getting colder, which means we're going into another ice age, folks. Exactly as we predicted because of the Maunder minimum.
Unfortunately, I think all these people failed thermodynamics if they ever took it in school.
Precisely,
because they see these these fake photos of glaciers falling into the water, and they think, "Oh my gosh, that's going to get in the water. It's going to raise the water temperature."
Yeah, but
No,
let's go back to this thing with Telegram, because when I first heard this, I went, "They aren't encrypted. They're parked on this open source platform, aren't they?"
Well, they are. I'm going to talk.
Are
about
they?
slightly.
Yeah, they are encrypted.
Slightly.
They use several protocols, including AES 256 and SHA 256. And so what they have done, and I've double checked this with some of the world experts in encryption, and Telegram has a slightly better encryption than either of those standards. But both of the standards that I just mentioned were broken years ago. The SHA 256 was broken in 2001, and the AES 256 was broken by one of our mathematicians in 2013, more like 2008, but he says officially let's go with 2013. And what they've done is they've combined those two standards, and they've created a way of slightly improving the security for Telegram. But here is the dirty, dark secret of that story, in that our intelligence agencies can crack those, and therefore Telegram is crackable. So therefore, this is a kabuki theater that they're complaining about encryption, because they can get into those encrypted messages already. So this is another case of where the government is lying.
They're not encrypted.
Well, the government is lying to the public about the fact that they're really not safe. They are encrypted, but the encryption can be cracked.
Well, are you encrypted if you don't encrypt?
It's kind of like it's kind of like keeping honest people honest. If you run across an encryption with Telegram and you're not a mathematician, then you don't know how to unencrypt it. But for anybody who knows, including the NSA and our government, it's decryptable, and that's not the story here. That's my point. That's not the story here. So what is the story? I think it's because Telegram was moving down the path of becoming a bank and to offer some sort of currency. And as they got closer to the city of London, that's when they took him, because they don't want that competition, and or they want to subsume his technology into the Goldman Sachs patents for cryptocurrency and the new digital currency and the social credit score. So they needed to take him off the table at this point, but it's not because they couldn't read his messages.
No, absolutely not. And by the way, the CIA and through In-Q-Tel and through DARPA created the internet for weapons development between American universities and British universities. And so it was created for killing people. And then when they allowed it to go through the World Wide Web, and the guy who I always make fun of,
crazy guys like me said, "Hey, okay, I'm going to use it."
So let's remember, what was the first thing that they used it for? Weapon development. Second thing they used it for was called the dark web. It still exists. Anybody can go on, go to Tor, go on. You want child pornography? You want corruption? You want all of the black ops deals going on. If you want the insider trading, just go to that dark web. Now, they'll tell you, and this is the British power of propaganda, they'll tell you no one can break into these things. Government can't get into the phones of the serial killers. Complete and absolute insane nonsense. Yes, they can. And then they'll tell you, oh no, it's all in the cloud. There's not even any physical place where all this is happening. It's up in the cloud somewhere. It's up in Wi-Fi. It's up in our atmosphere. That's so stupid. Or how about crypto coin mining? Stupid. How about understanding that when I say CIA, I mean the British Five Eyes, and that includes the FBI, the CIA, the Mossad,
Right.
on and on, all the G5, G6, all the British intelligence agencies. They all created this. And what is it created for? Last time I counted, it was over $100 billion have been stolen from crypto coins. Okay. So it is not in any way secure. Hash trees don't make it secure. Complete nonsense. And who is controlling it? The same people who've always controlled this, folks.
It's controlled out of the .io domain in Diego Garcia in the British East India Ocean, and it's on an island that on paper the U.S. Navy controls, but we've given a contract to Serco to manage the U.S. Navy satellite system. So it's all kabuki theater. We're run by the British.
Operation Cat Pounce and Operation Deputy Dog. Cat Pounce is now we know who have been brought into the light. These are the slimy creatures that grow in darkness. And when they're exposed to light, then people should chase them down and make sure that they and their families are very well aware that we know that they're criminals. Now, what can we do? We need to get sheriffs, or we need to get countries to go after these big companies, these corporations that have until this moment always been exempt from prosecution. Corporations can't be prosecuted for killing people. And so let's remember, Pirbright Institute was created to manufacture the new world war, which is a pharmaceutical world war, all centered out of AstraZeneca, Pirbright, all of these British groups who also have their facilities in China, where these things tend to be released upon the Chinese people, and the Chinese people say they don't know what's going on. Also, Anthony Fauci, he has his 5 times he's had COVID. Now he has West Nile. Well, that just shows you, folks, there's a pharmaceutical war on.
Believe that?
Of course, it's nonsense. This is probably so that he can fake his death, and so he won't be prosecuted for being as bad as Hitler or Himmler or any of these other people who basically love to kill, murder, depopulate underneath the auspices of what the British Pilgrims Society and British organizations say is their number one agenda: depopulation. Remember that the British monarchy has made statements. I think it was Prince Philip, who said he wanted to reincarnate as a virus that could kill as many people on Earth as possible. Yeah. This is the sickness that came out of demon worship in Babylon and then became literally the currency of the Babylonian Radhanites, and then the English, British, German, Portuguese bankers who were all slave traders. So folks, if you don't know it, you are an economic slave, unless you have somehow risen above it, which some people do. But it doesn't matter. You don't own anything in America because you have to keep paying taxes on it. So we have no unalienable right to own our own property, because why? All property is owned by the monarchy, and we are living in an extension of the British monarchy through the SES, Senior Executive Service, through Serco, through the British Crown agents.
Well, let's also add the major American exchanges through their ownership holdings all track back to the City of London as well, and the Rothschilds and Reuters. So we don't have control of our stock exchange even.
Carnegie took over propaganda in America. Rothschilds took over oil. And then with the oil byproducts, they created the pharmaceutical industry. And now you have basically political individuals in America who are clamoring to become basically British aristocrats who are, of course, paid off and cannot discuss the king's business, cannot discuss the monarch's business, and follow Chatham House rules, so they can never say where they got their insider trading information.
And yet, you, as a user of a bank in America, are now being subjected to this know your customer practice within the banks, KYC. And I think everybody's noticed how nosy the bank is getting about if you send more than $10,000, or what are you going to buy with that money? And the banker is supposedly trying to find out to stop terrorism. But the fact is, it's much more sinister than that, because all the KYC data, we've tracked this back, is sent to the UK. That's where it's managed. That's where it's kept in various Rothschild-controlled database centers. And so therefore, our banking system is collecting data for this offshore bank account that's under the protection of the British Crown, and they can use that data to do whatever they want to in terms of manipulation. And what we also see here in these members of the British Pilgrims Society is the head of MORI, the guy who started MORI, the public research and opinion company, is listed. His name is, I forget his name now. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, he has been a pilgrim for his entire career, and he has been one of the key directors of the United States branch. And it's all been about manipulating public opinion so that they get what they want. It's not for the good of the public, it's for their good.
Absolutely. And then what do? They bring these demons into law. They pass laws that nobody has ever even read. How many politicians in our federal government pass laws they haven't read? Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's treason. Right. And they should not just be kicked out of their job, they should be put in prison and then, of course, meet the consequences of treason. So what we have to do is realize that we have been under the control of demons and people working through law, through banks, through pharmaceutical companies, through corporations, to make sure that we are enslaved, and yet they give us entertainment and sports and sex and all kinds of dark gratifications of the 7 deadly sins as our payment.
Yep, that's exactly right. Robert M. Wooster, DL, he is the current head of the executive committee of the Pilgrim Society. And
now, I just want to point out,
is running
these
more
people have nothing to do with the U.S. ambassador.
Yeah, they really take
For
care
that
of the
reason alone, it must be closed down by every single nation in the world. Should realize that the Pilgrim Society is their enemy.
Yes.
And this is why we invite anyone in the world to find out about Operation Cat Pounce. You can contribute to the cause. And it's even better when letters all around the world come to the Pilgrim Society saying, we know who you are.
So Tyler, Michael, you and your teams, the miners, I have to applaud you because, you know, I did tell you many years ago, yes, I did mention the Pilgrim Society in my list that I made earlier today. I didn't know. I had no idea how pervasive it was, how powerful it was, and how we are absolutely in their absolute control, and we are their slaves. We need to do what they have created in all their isms, which is a ground swell, a grassroots raising up of people who fight their economic caste system. This is a caste system. And if you watch British theater and British movies, what are they always talking about? There's lowlings and then there's the aristocrats. And folks, the Pilgrim Society are the aristocrats and we're the lowlings, and we need to rise up.
For the Holy Grail.